All right, everybody. Welcome back to Fintech Fridays. Today's theme of the episode is turning the tables. We are turning the tables on one of the leading influencers in the mortgage space, and one of the godfathers of mortgage podcasting. And it's my friend Dustin Owen. Hey, Dustin, how you doing, bud?
I'm fantastic, Brian. Wow, I like that. One of the godfathers. I mean, I'm trying to still figure out how to be a father, let alone a godfather, but nonetheless, an influencer. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a positive thing or a negative thing. Who am I influencing? What are we doing? But I'll take it. I think it's a compliment. I'm going to take it. I don't think I've earned it yet, but maybe you set an expectation for me to now have to live up to. How about that?
I love it. Oh, and I should also mention a fellow CMB, a fellow certified
Yes.
mortgage banker.
Yeah, you down CMB? Yeah, you know me. Yes.
So you've been at this this social sport longer than most, and specifically this podcast game. I've kind of gotten a lot of inspiration from watching you. You bring on all these super interesting, cool people in the industry. Now you're a little more formal than my humble little podcast. Dustin only does podcasts in person, so
Yeah, we
I
do.
have to move my butt down to Florida twice to get on your show. But
Well, how about this, Brian? And we only have guests on probably every 9 to 12 episodes.
right, right,
So we
right.
are very selective with who our guests are. And then we do throw up that massive hurdle of, well, and you have to be live in person to record, whether
Yeah,
you want to fly down to Orlando, Florida, which, by the way, we've had someone fly in from Canada, as well as twice from Michigan. Or you can also catch me where I'm going to be next. Like, oh, hey, I hear you're speaking at this loan officer event in Charlotte in August. Hey, if you want to be in Charlotte and you want to be on the show, maybe we can make that
yeah.
happen. Or Philadelphia in October, right? If you're going
Boom.
to be at NBA Annual in October. So, like, one of my current dream guests, I'd love to have Bill Kilmer on from the
Oh,
NBA,
yeah.
right? Because Bill, to hear him speak with that passion and that energy about policy and about what's going on the Hill, and this person's going to get elected, and if this group wins election, then this is who's going to be appointed to this particular cabinet position. And by the way, these are the odds that it actually happens the way we think it's going to happen. I
Right.
love it. He
Oh,
always
yeah.
has the inside scoop. And more importantly, he can then dumb it down to my level and tell me how it impacts my world, which is mortgage banking and real estate, right?
Right. So let's start with what inspired you to start the loan officer podcast to begin with, and then I want to get into what you're really moving into, which is really taking what you built in the podcast and putting fuel on it to really superpower um, the loan officers that are your subscribers. So let's start with how did it start? What was
Yeah,
that? What was
perfect.
that like?
I'll take that and run with it. I have a 2 hour answer. I also have like the 8 minute answer. So I'll try to give you the 8 minute answer because I know this is only like a half an hour show. At the end of the day, the one thing I am most passionate about, here I am in my mid 40s, is financial literacy. It is literally teaching children 18 plus, everyone from 18 to 80, blind, crippled, or crazy, like anyone who's willing to listen, all the things that weren't taught to us in school. And those
Right.
things are typically personal finance, their budgeting, the power of purchasing real estate, how to purchase real estate, how to level up. Sometimes it's mental health, it's physical health, it's the combination of all three. So that being a driving force throughout my career as a loan officer, when I decided I was at a point in my life where I wanted to flex some creative freedoms, I chose the podcast format, and I really chose topics that I felt like were everything they didn't teach us in school. Now, I called it the Loan Officer Podcast because at the end of the day, although my degree is in advertising and public relations, in the first 3 years out of college, I did work in television advertising. At my core, I'm still an LO. And I'm one of those people, like our friend Dave Savage over at Mortgage Coach. I'm one of those people who truly does believe that a mortgage loan originator for most of America is the closest thing to a financial coach that they're ever going to be able to experience. So I use the name The Loan Officer Podcast because it speaks to who I feel like I am at my core, but it really speaks to the philosophy that I think every American, every adult needs a good LO in their pocket, because LOs, for many of them, will teach them the basics of credit, the basics of financial responsibility, how to budget, what's a 401k, why does compound interest work, what's the rule of 72, right? These are all things you can learn from your LO while you're also buying a house, which would be your number one asset, which is going to be the way that you generate the most wealth in your life, right? So that was poured into this kid who in fourth grade really wanted to be a radio sports announcer. And then at 18, this kid who fell in love with talk radio. And then this professional who dabbed in trying to make videos and bombed miserably at it. Absolutely bombed miserably, didn't have the right team, didn't have the right technology. And I put it all together. I'm like, well, what if I did a radio show? What if I brought in cameras? What if we then recorded it and put it up on YouTube? And then what if I grabbed a co-host who's also my producer, and we did the show together? And yes, we're going to call it the Loan Officer Podcast, but we don't want it to let the name fool people. Yes, we make content for LOs, sure. But we also make content for loan officers' clients who are realtors, who are homeowners, or people who want to buy houses. But we just started creating this radio show and then putting it on Spotify, on Apple, and on YouTube, and people liked it. When I first started, my two business partners at the mortgage company thought I was crazier than I really am. And they're like, WTF, why are you doing this? And I'm like, look, at the end of the day, we had at the time 48 loan originators who directly reported to us. Those loan originators had roughly 2,000 new clients every single year. I said, at a minimum, let me create content for our 48 LOs and their 2,000 clients, which also meant their 5,000 referral sources.
Right.
And let's see where it goes. And I guess luckily for me, people liked it. So now we have people tuning in 37 different countries, in all 50 states. And this year we should eclipse 2 million downloads, on our way to 5 million downloads.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
Thank you. It's fun. You know what it is? It's fun. And because it's fun, we continue doing it. If it wasn't fun, I would have quit a long time ago.
Yeah, no, and I think the fun part comes through loud and clear as a subscriber. But I'm one of the fortunate ones that's been able to kind of sit across the table from you and feel the energy in person, and so I know it's a sincere fun when you say it's fun. I get it. I love it. So let's talk about kind of what you're working on now. I think you're in the launch phase of kind of taking the Loan Officer Podcast and really blowing it up into something much bigger and frankly much more valuable to the loan officer population.
Yeah, so that's our website you're probably alluding to,
yep.
TLOPonline.com. TLOP is TLOP online.com. For anyone with an education higher than maybe the 7th grade, if you said the acronym TLOP, it stands for something. Well, the Loan Officer Podcast. One of our first hardcore fans, this guy, Tom O'Brien. Tom was the first to coin the word TLOP. He was like, oh, D-O, I'm a T-lopper. I'm like, dude, I love that.
Yeah.
So we named the website TLOPonline because if you're a fan of the show, you love our content, then you too are a T-lopper. But what I realized is that we were making content that, yes, LOs dug, they were digging it. They were all into it. We'd get the comments like, hey, I learned more from you than I did my branch manager. I was like, ooh, maybe you should find a new branch manager, because you shouldn't. I should be able to accentuate what you're learning with your employer. I should add to it, maybe be the cool uncle. But I didn't have any content that was specifically just LO specific. So we launched a website, and I was like, okay, how can I make a website that is branch manager in a box? And I've been around for a minute or 2 decades even. And when I was getting started, there was this website called Loan Toolbox, right? That's where we met people like Barry Habib for the first time, Sue Woodard for the first time, Renee Rodriguez for the first time, Kai McBride, and people like that for the first time. Greg Frost back in the day, right?
Yeah.
R.I.P. Greg. And we don't have that today. So I was like, well, let me look at our audience, which right now, roughly half of our audience comes from the mortgage community. The other half comes from the other. And let's make them something. Let's give them access to all of the trainings, the scripts, the marketing ideas, and maybe even some coaching along the side, maybe some sales training, maybe give them access to vendors like FinLocker or vendors like MBS Highway or like Mortgage Coach or like Jungo, et cetera, et cetera. And let's put it all under one roof where we can just say, hey, look, become a member. We'll give you a lot of stuff for free. And if you want the really, really good stuff, we're going to make you make a small donation. But understanding what it's like to be a rookie LO, because by the way, I once was one.
Right.
And I know what it's like to be 10 grand in credit card debt. I know what it's like to have my student loans deferred. And I know what it's like to have to go do a side hustle in order to bring a couple extra $100 in because I was launching my LO career. We're going to make it affordable. So to me, affordable is like, how do I put a price tag that they look at it and say, wow, that's like half a commission on just one transaction. I'm like, yep, for half a commission on just one transaction for the entire year, we'll give you all of this. It's branch manager in a box. So if you have a great branch manager, awesome. Let us come be the cool uncle for you and help tie down some of the things you're learning from your branch manager. Maybe you're a solo artist. Maybe you don't have much of a management team. Cool. Then for a small fee, we can slide in and we can fill that role for you. Ultimately, and I'll end it on this, ultimately what I'm trying to do is shape the future of the mortgage industry, starting with the loan originator, because I was trained a certain way. I became a top producer by being a certain way. And that certain way is understanding there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all mortgage.
Right.
Mortgages must be tailor-made to match all of our borrowers' financial needs, wants, and goals. And I do have a fiduciary responsibility to my client, but that is that not as their financial advisor, but as their source of information. Let me point them in the right direction. Let me invite them in the room where it happens or give them a seat at the table so that they're introduced to the right thoughts, the right books, the right advisors. But when they're coming to me, it's not just to get a loan. It's to get a loan, it's to get educated. And I think we can do that through this website, TLOPonline.com.
I'm a fan, you know that, and I think you and I share this passion for financial literacy.
Yes, we do.
And what I really appreciate about kind of the approach you're taking, and it comes through in all of the episodes and with the content that's on the website, is you're talking about a lifelong relationship between a loan officer and their client. It's not a transaction. It's not, how do I get to the closing fastest so that I can get on to the next, transaction. It's truly, taking a fiduciary type responsibility and approach to helping your client find the best possible solution for their family situation. And you kind of hit on this at the onset. For a first-time home buyer, buying that first home, and that's going to be their largest asset in their personal portfolio, that we know that leads more often than not to generational wealth building, right? And so why isn't the loan officer viewed as that trusted source for not just mortgage education, but overall financial health, financial fitness, and financial literacy?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think of two examples when you start talking about the first-time home buyer and what it could or couldn't do. And I have an example, a great example. My nephew is buying his first house. He is 23 years of age. His girlfriend is 24 years of age, and they're buying a house. Now, the unfortunate thing is in Central Florida, you basically have to be dual income if you're trying to buy a house, even if you're
Right.
a first-time home buyer. But they were willing to move to the outskirts of the market. They found a new construction home that fits their budget. But I'm like, what a great start for them at this point in their life. Now, one could argue if you are forced to have dinner with me every other Sunday at Nana's house for the better part of the past 18 years, you had a leg up because I wasn't going to let any young person come across my peripheral without me injecting, whether it's warranted, asked for or not,
Right.
my advice based on what I've learned through this industry. But on the converse side of that, so that's a positive. I have my niece's best friend called me 3 years ago, and they're such best friends. She too calls me Uncle D. My niece and nephew call me Uncle D. And she said, Uncle D, can you help me buy my first house? Now, she wasn't dual income. She's solo provider in her early to mid 20s. And she didn't buy for whatever reason, she was a little bit afraid. Maybe she felt like she couldn't keep up with the financial investment to keep a house up. She could afford the payment, but maybe not any of the maintenance. And she didn't buy. And I look back, here we are in 2023, and she was trying to buy in 2020.
Yeah.
Like that young lady at 27, that's how old she is today. At 27, she would have amassed $60,000 of wealth. And that's an opportunity cost that she just won't get back.
Right.
Now, I hope that she learns from that and she can then pull from that in the future when she's given a similar situation. She can make a decision so that she doesn't miss out on the opportunity to make 60 grand over 3 years. Like where else is a 25-year-old who makes 50, 60 grand a year going to be able to save or amass 60 grand in wealth, but through home ownership?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of think about the first time home buyer. There's two paths that they're going on to prepare. One is the financial path that I think we're really, we're all aware of, but there's an emotional path too that has to align with financial readiness. And I think a lot of times the emotional side is just the fear of the unknown and the uncertainty. And I think the more we can do as loan professionals, mortgage professionals, financial friends, our friends at Trust Engine talk about financial friends. The more we can help people get comfortable with their financial side of the equation, I think we help them get to that emotional state of readiness as well.
1,000%. By the way, shout out to Alex and Dave over at Trust Engine. I still rock my financial friend with benefits t-shirt. Unfortunately, my no borrower left behind t-shirt, I had to throw it out. I wore it to the gym one too many times and those things start getting a little funky after a while.
You got left behind.
I love financial friend with benefits so much that I reached out to Alex and I was like, hey, bro, I would love to coin my podcast as your financial friends with benefits. Do you mind? So hopefully he'll give me that thumbs up that I'm not invading on his creativity, but I love it so much that, look, I want to adopt it and I want to use it myself. I'll just make sure I give credit where credit is due.
Right on. No, I think it's awesome because to me it speaks to what we all know and believe about loan officers. They're more than, loan hacks, right? They're more than just getting a transaction to the finish line. They are that financial lifeline. I think you and I talked about this when we did your show. Most first-time home buyers, arguably 95+% of them, they don't have another financial person in their life. They don't have enough assets to be on the radar of a financial advisor. So who is going to fill that role? It's going to be that loan officer.
Well, a good loan officer, right? You said we all know loan officers should, and I want to interject, a good loan officer should. Now, if you and I could have our way going forward, every loan officer who is licensed and properly trained would be one of those good ones.
Right.
Because you have the most influence when you're talking to a person about purchasing their home. It's beyond just, do you qualify? Yeah, I can qualify you for a loan, but is it the right loan?
Right.
Well, I don't know. Let's dive deeper into that. Now, all of a sudden, the conversation you're having with them is one in which many others aren't. You win, they win. But then it's like, how do we get more people to follow in those footsteps?
Yeah, let's shift the gears. It's not going to be a major shift, but before we hit record, you and I were talking about the week that I had this week.
I'm so jealous. You were at the FHFA in one of my favorite cities, Washington, D.C. That's pretty awesome.
Yep, I was lucky enough to have been included in the inaugural FHFA 2023 Tech Sprint. Jason Cave, who heads up the Fintech division at FHFA, he's the deputy director, reports to Sandra Thompson. His team came up with this idea to bring a cross section of the industry together, get into the offices at FHFA, spend 4 days addressing some of the big meaty problems that are facing the mortgage industry, and not just talk about the problems, but they broke these 90 or so people into teams, 10 teams, and each team kind of picked a problem statement. And starting on Monday morning and working through Thursday midday, basically built a presentation or a proposal rather that they would like to see implemented in the industry. And we don't have time to do a deep dive on it, but what came out of it was the theme of what I saw was it all starts with trust, and our industry lacks trust in the ecosystem. If you look at a loan go through the loan manufacturing process, there's checkers checking the checkers, checking the recheckers, right? It just happens and happens and happens. And if loans are getting moved from originator to investor or wherever, they're rechecking the checkers that checked 4 times upstream. And so that just screams to this lack of trust. And what it came down to was, we need a better way to trust the direct source data that's used in the loan manufacturing process. And what you and I were talking about before we hit record was how the role of the loan officer doesn't go away ever. We don't replace loan officers. What we do is we have the loan officer do the highest and best use, the highest and best function of their experience, which is being that financial friend. And if they can get, quote unquote, out of the manufacturing process of a mortgage, they still have to know guidelines. They still have to know how to put loans together for that are tailored to the consumer, but they don't need to chase documents and pre-underwrite loans and do all that crazy stuff. We have a digitized process that should be able to do a lot of that for them. They need to do what they do best, and that's what you're advocating with TLOPonline and with the Loan Officer podcast is, let the loan officer be the trusted advisor, the financial friend, and do that at scale in their communities, and then let the process do the work on the loans. I just said a whole lot, but I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, what's interesting is you mentioned the podcast, you also mentioned the website, and we do a lot of training, right? We teach people how to run a business, how to sell, how to market, how to overcome objection, how to deal with rebuttals. We teach them how to properly consult the consumer, but I don't teach people how to read a tax return or how to calculate income, whether the person's hourly, salary. I don't teach them how to read a credit report, the importance of title. Like, that's not our role. Now, in today's world, they need to know that. But could you imagine if we lived in a world where today, if you wanted to become a loan originator and you weren't working for a bank or a wholly owned subsidiary of a bank, the very first thing you're going to have to do is go take the 20-hour course. So call my friend Ken Perry over at Knowledge Coop, take a 20-hour course. But then you're like, oh my gosh, I then have to study for this exam, right? Because only 56% passed their first time. So I can tell you, hey, call my buddy Rocky over at MLO Study Buddy. They do an amazing job of prepping young professionals to pass this exam. But then once you pass the exam, you're like, holy cow, I have to learn Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA, USDA, the standards of jumbo. Yes, you do. Then I have to figure out, how do I read a title report? How do I read a credit report? How do I read an appraisal? How do I calculate income? How do I review bank statements? What am I looking for? On top of, I have to learn how to use all this technology, my LOS, my POS, my FinLocker app, right? All of this. And not once have they taken the time to go out and build their referral network,
right,
build their business, understand the importance of lead tracking, of using a CRM, of, like all of the business side of things. So it's like, and then you got to believe there's no way they're learning how to become great consultants and advisors when all of that is dumped on their plate.
Right.
So what if we could create a system where, yes, we use technology, and I need you to know programs and products, and I need you to know how to properly tailor make financing to match your borrower's financial needs, wants, and goals on a loan that they will qualify for. But I don't need you calculating the income. Let me just give you the income. I don't need you tracking down the income docs. They'll be provided to you. I don't need you calculating the assets. It'll be given to you. So at least that's like 2-3 less things you have to do. They're just provided to you. And I want you to take that time and invest it back into your knowledge of just personal finance, of budgeting, of helping someone make the right financial decisions, not just in buying their house and getting the right loan, but if you advise someone to put 10% down instead of 20% down, and you advise them to do no PM, lender paid MI versus borrower paid MI, you then put together a plan of what are they going to do with that extra 10% that maybe they did have, right? Maybe they're going to pay off some credit card debt. Maybe they're going to have 6 months reserves. Maybe they're going to call your buddy and open up a 529 for their children. Maybe they're going to invest into a Roth IRA. And the reason why they're doing the lender paid versus the borrower paid is because lender paid saves them $30 a month on a home that they're going to live in for probably 5 to 7 years, because they bought the house when the kids were in 6th and 8th grade. They'll be selling this 3,000 square foot house in a matter of 7 years once the 6th grader graduates high school, right? But like, it's hard to teach all of that when someone is so focused on, how do I calculate hourly income? True story, yesterday, I launched a new coaching class. So through the podcast, we selectively will coach loan originators in small groups. Now, we coach large groups twice a month, every single month. That's what comes with a premium membership. But one of the questions was, hey, DO, when are you going to cover how to calculate income on hourly workers? True story. This is a guy a year in the business. He's closed 10 loans. He was a school administrator prior to getting into mortgage. And I was like, George, that's not this, buddy. Like, that's not this. You got to call your MI company. You got to call your corporate office, or you got to talk to your sales manager, or go to our friends over at Zenix, or go to our friends over at the Mortgage Bankers Association and see if they have trainings for you to help you on that technical side. But what if we could eliminate just that piece of the technical side? George could go figure out, what is a 401k? Why is it important if companies match or don't match? Who qualifies for a Roth IRA? Because although he's not a financial advisor, he at least can understand it to a point where he introduces people, his clients, to those concepts, and then he can introduce them to the professional who can help them execute on those contents.
Love it. I love it.
Thank you. Wind me up and let me go, baby. That's all you have to do.
It's so great. I mean, I'm thinking back to, you and I got into this business a while ago. I entered the business in 1991. There was no tech, and there certainly was no training, and you totally just had to figure it out on your own, right? And it's. By
the way, that's still today, unfortunately.
I know.
Like, there's a little more tech for me in the podcast, and for me in the website that we built to support loan officers. Maybe it's a good thing, right? It's a good thing because people need to go out and become resourceful, and they're turning to outside influencers to teach them things that I believe could have been taught internal. But it still is that way. But you were 1991. Wow. I was wearing Z Cavaricis in 1991. I just ditched my MC Hammer pants.
Nice. That is a visual. It's going to stay with me through the weekend.
Oh, yeah. I had the big Vanilla Ice haircut. I had the gold hoop earring. Oh, yeah. I thought I was hot stuff.
We got to get that photo on on the thumbnail for this podcast.
Wouldn't that be great? No, but you were saying, I interrupted you, Brian. I apologize. 91, you got started in the business where you basically walked around and handed out rate sheets?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's what you did back then, right? It was pretty much, my first day on the job, I was actually not even qualified to go hand out rate sheets. My first day on the job was, I had to call. I was returning calls. Today I would be called an LOA probably, or marketing assistant or something like that. But I was just doing return calls and calling people and say if there was a number on this callback, it was a name, phone number, and then this number with a percentage sign. I didn't know what the number meant. But basically what I would say is, if I could turn your 10 into an 8%, would you be interested? If they said yes, I put it over here, and then a loan officer would, make that call back. So I was kind of like a lead. I was like lead routing before lead routing existed.
Yeah, I said Rick Ruby over at the Core calls you a dialer.
There you go.
That's a great place for people to get started. If you can dominate dialing, then I can teach you the business. If you can't dominate dialing, maybe you're not cut out for this. Hey, I know you have to run because you have a super important meeting. Anything you want to say to wrap this up for us?
No, I think for the audience, for the Fintech Fridays audience that is growing, it's not quite to the level of the Loan Officer Podcast audience, but for my audience, I wanted to make sure that those that don't know you got a chance to meet you, because you are one of the most energetic and engaging guys I've had the pleasure to meet here in the last few years. And really, for the audience that's kind of tuning in and trying to learn about this business, the kind of the next gen loan officer, you need to be looking at. You need to, first of all, subscribe to the Loan Officer Podcast. That's a must. And then you should look at the resources that TLOPonline is providing, because to Dustin's point, it is a loan officer, it's a branch manager in a box, and more, frankly. So I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, and I appreciate everything you're doing for our industry.
Brian, I appreciate the invite, and as long as the industry appreciates what I'm doing, I can't wait to keep on doing and doing and doing. And Bob Brookschmidt, if you're tuning in, I love DC. Any opportunity I can get to come to 1919 M Street, you just let me know. All right.
Dustin, thanks for coming on. Everybody, thanks for tuning in, and come back next Friday for the next episode.
Take care. Bye. Thank you.